I just want to ask a couple questions about it. You can sit next to me. It's okay. So that was obviously a lot of VFX, a ton. And how is that? How is creating a 360 video with that much effects and still keeping the narrative that you want to tell, also with something that I want to ask everyone with your client, and immersing everyone into that world without, obviously some of the technology that you had at the time.
Sure. So just with regard to your last comment, I look at it now and I cringe because really the technology is so outdated in a lot of ways. But I think, and this was what we were talking about before we came in, which is sort of differentiating between 360 video versus VR, kind of the core conceit of the utilization of live video versus CG elements and the like, kind of a passive static experience versus a more immersive one. So I only provide that kind of context by way of saying that the economics of this kind of storytelling are actually surprisingly manageable. Now obviously we spent a lot on activating a live experience and creating the barn and doing all of those other things, but I think one of the things that continues to be exciting to me in terms of really approaching this less from a technology standpoint and more from a narrative standpoint is the ability to understand that at the end of the day, the Headless Horseman is such an iconic character. Obviously, that particular series represented kind of a modern retelling of, obviously a very old narrative. And I think that the idea that everyone was looking to emulate was that if you could be in that space and interact and battle and then literally lose your head, like what would that look like? Now, the thing that we did in a subsequent iteration of it, given that you have a lot of these head-mounted displays now that have internet connectivity and kind of the ability to engage with other devices in the space, is that we would take the photo of the person against green screen. So for example, take your head and actually, and then actually put your head in the experience that you're watching. So once you battle the Headless Horseman, he'll literally hold up your head and you'll be looking at him in a way. And I think, look, the objective there is less about parlor games and things like that, but understanding that we are, everyone on this panel, people who are the emerging storytellers in the space, we're really talking about a new cinematic language. As opposed to the 100+ years where we've been accustomed in mediated narrative to looking at a rectangular square and understanding that although there's a proscenium around it, it can engage us, it can immerse us, but it isn't immersive in the same way that this new storytelling will be. What we were trying to do there is create that kind of thing that had that wow factor to it, that could be done economically, and then at the end of the day was very forward-leaning about demonstrating the potential of what this technology could do.
Good deal. And as far as the series and the VR experience, were there any, I guess, story elements that exactly?
That's a great question. So look, I've been working in the TV and film space since I was 15, when I used to sneak on movie sets and be like, who are you? I'm like, you hired me last week. And I only say that by way of saying I'm in deep, I love this and I love this world. And what has always been interesting to me about television is that the way, at least prior to the emergence of binge viewing, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and the like, is shows premiere in September. They run until May, but there's these huge blocks of time during holidays and whatever. So you're not getting 30 weeks of consecutive programming. And then there's now shorter series and things of that nature. So Sleepy Hollow's big challenge was, it premiered in September, it was off the air by January because it was usually 13 to 18 episodes, and with the exception of maybe the Christmas week, they ran consecutively throughout. And then you had nothing. You had nothing from January until the following September. In a time when there's kind of this huge glut of content, peak TV, you can't do that. you're going to lose mind share, you're going to lose market share in a way. So what we first and foremost tried to do is just make a thing that had some wow factor to it, as I said a moment ago. And then the second element was, to answer your question specifically, was that the graveyard plays a central theme sort of in the story. So it wasn't like a huge thing like, oh, it's picking up, but it meant to show you kind of the entry point to a story beat that you would see in the second season of the show. You know, there are ways to go deeper with that, and obviously the thing that's that I'm very excited about and is relevant to some of my work right now is episodic VR, so that like things end organically at a certain point and then tune back in, or binge watch or tune in or do whatever. So we're trying to draw that thread loosely, and over time, obviously, I think it'll become like, oh my God, it's a cliffhanger, what's going to happen